Good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Antonio live on Monday morning with the continuation of our Let's Talk About Food talk. Sorry I missed last week. I was away enjoying my time at the beach. And so here we are talking about food as an ongoing process. In Ayurveda, the understanding of food plays a very pivotal role in understanding health and ill health. It's really about the food that we consume, what's the right type of food, how much of the food are we consuming, when are we consuming it, so portions and time, matra and kala, understanding our constitutions, or prakriti versus vikriti, understanding what foods are appropriate for us today in spite of our constitution. So if we have presenting symptoms, then foods have to be adjusted, diet has to be adjusted, lifestyle has to be adjusted. In Ayurveda, the understanding that ahara and vihara, so diet and lifestyle, are primary factors which are used to assess and determine and reconfigure based on where a person is at and what they're presenting with. So it's very multifactorial. It's never just one piece, and usually when there's some sort of imbalance or some sort of disequilibrium or some sort of indication that there is something out of a normal range, we will be looking at diet and lifestyle and various other factors to consider the whole picture, because Ayurveda is a holistic system. It's not just targeting a particular organ or system in the body. It's looking at the whole body, it's looking at the whole person as a whole. And so understanding that food is a very important piece, because that's the input that gets delivered to the cells on many levels, and then the output will be our levels of vitality and energy and inspiration and clarity and just proper health, good health, that's designed for our own constitutional makeup, that is designed for our own individualized expressions of life. In essence, whether you believe in heaven or not, or if you believe in any of these things that you really feel that's important for you, we are alive. And so how can we promote our health and well-being so that we can enjoy life? And so with understanding some things around food, today we're going to talk about some recommendations. And, by all means, if you have any questions during this time period, or even after this time period together, private message me or write in the comment section here. I would love to answer them. I'm always excited to talk about my favorite topics, which are yoga and Ayurveda and massage and just lots of things that are mentally stimulating and emotionally stimulating. I love it. I love all of it. So let's talk about some basic suggestions that Ayurveda talks about around food. So we are talking about something like you have a cup of hot tea and it's very hot, and then you decide, oh my god, this tea is too hot, so I'm going to get some cool water to cool it down. Ayurveda would say viruddha ahara, antagonistic. It's incompatible when you have something extreme like that, where you're adding cold water to hot water immediately to reduce the heat and make it more tempered. You already create on a deeper level, chemical level, an antagonistic force, because you have something very hot and something very cold. They come together and it creates, in essence, an incompatibility. It's antagonistic. And on a very fundamental cellular level, Ayurveda knows that this is not okay. Another example would be you're taking the leftovers out of the fridge and you want to heat the food up. And you take it from the fridge immediately into the pan or microwave, for some people who microwave, or any other form of heating. And you're going to that extreme, from the fridge to the heating device. That's antagonistic. That will cause, on a cellular level, on a deeper level of digestion, indigestion. And you think about like, oh, I'm just heating it up. Let it sit outside for a couple minutes. If that hot cup of tea is too hot, let it sit for a couple minutes, or boil another little bit of hot water just to kind of like help mitigate and negate. Or just let it sit, really. That's the easiest way. When we think about food combinations, when we think about spices, when we're putting something in a plate that has very sweet and very spicy or very pungent, they're very antagonistic. Something like sweet and sour chicken, or sweet and spicy chicken. Those are antagonistic forces. They fight against each other, and it creates an incompatibility, and therefore will create indigestion, according to Ayurveda. And Ayurveda has assessed this for thousands of years, so it knows, it's very much indoctrinated in that way, that there are certain things that are known causative factors that are simplistic, that people do day to day without realizing, like, oh, this doesn't really go with this. And kind of spinning off on that topic of, foods and, sweet and sour chicken from certain, Asian restaurants. I was watching this amazing, really well done sort of documentary called Ugly Delicious on Netflix. And it's 2 seasons, and the episodes are about an hour long, and very well worth it. Each episode is a topic of a particular food, talking about its history, its origin, and how it's just, evolutionarily progressed, and things like that. And the lead producer is a top chef of New York City, and he's Asian, and he's amazing, and I love his personality. He's just very, very awesome. And he's going through different foods, and he mentioned one really key factor, especially when he was doing the episode on Chinese food or Asian food. And he said, and actually he was conversing with an owner of a restaurant, and he said, what do people do here in the US when they really want authentic, Chinese food? And a few owners of the restaurant said, you have to ask us privately for those things that are not on the menu. Because a lot of things have made its way into the US and therefore become Americanized. Americanized Indian food, Americanized Italian food, Americanized Chinese food, Americanized all types of cultural foods to appeal to the American culture, the Western culture, which isn't usually correct, because we still have high levels of obesity, high levels of anxiety, high levels of depression, high levels of diabetes in the US, and all those cultures that have been influenced by the Western culture itself. It's the culture of excess. The 2 primary tastes that predominate in this westernized philosophy and way of being is sweet and salty. And then you combine them together and you create savory. So this excess of savory foods, we don't have enough exposure to bitter foods. An example of bitter foods would be dark leafy greens. That's amazing. Basil, rosemary, thyme. These foods have bitterness, and that's very important. It's important to get the 6 tastes in the diet. Now, not in the same dish. There are some restaurants that try to modulate this by creating a platter, and I've seen this in Indian restaurants, and I've seen this in some Ayurvedic restaurants where they put all 6 tastes on a plate. That is not correct according to Charaka and Sushruta and Bhagavata, which are the primary authors and teachers of Ayurveda. Having all 6 tastes on a plate does not make it dietarily correct. You can have it throughout the day, but in essence, when you're following a seasonal diet, you will get those tastes throughout the year. But definitely try not to push everything onto one plate and try to get all your 6 tastes in one sitting, in every single sitting, because now this becomes Varudahara, which is antagonistic, which is not appropriate, which means malabsorption. And you have to consider, as far as foods and other things, and let's consider what a food is in Ayurveda. There are 4 basic categories: a lickable, a chewable, an eatable, and a drinkable. So anything that is internalized, ingested, is considered some aspect of food, ahara. The body has to process it, no matter what. What goes in, comes out, and has to go through all these various channels and organs and systems accordingly. And so when you're putting things that are incompatibly together, now you're causing antagonistic cellular issues. And digestion is at least an indication. Bloating, diarrhea sometimes, mild constipation sometimes, or even excessive constipation, depending on how often you're doing that particular thing. So we're looking at all these components, and we're really watching, like, what am I putting into my body? What am I getting out of my body? If I'm really complaining my body's not doing this, that, and the other thing, and I want this, that, and the other thing, then what are you giving to it? Because the body is amazing. the body is self-sustainable. It really knows what it needs, and if we pay attention to the cues, if we pay attention to the subtle communication that the body presents itself with, we really can't go wrong. The mind comes in and tells many stories. So we try to come from a place within the mind that is more cultivated, which is more disciplined, which is more concrete, which is more established, and then we can trust that level of logic, yukti in Ayurveda. But if the mind is all over the place, we can't trust it. The senses are going all over the place. They're like 5 horses without the reins. So the charioteer, which is the centralized consciousness, has to pull it all together and then guide those senses in the right way, because the eyes see what they see, the nose smells what it smells, the ears hear what they hear, the mouth wants to taste what it wants to taste, and touching is very important. There are some cultures that eat with their hands, and that's a good way to ration how much you're eating. So in the Western system, we're using like forks and spoons and knives and things like that. Knives not so bad because you have to cut, but we're basically shoveling in large volumes of food, and then we're not masticating or digesting properly, and then we're expecting the stomach to do the extra work that the mouth didn't do, and then we're putting stress on the body. So then what doesn't get broken down, because primarily the stomach is breaking down proteins, because the hydrochloric acid and the other digestive enzymes serve a purpose to break down proteins, because they're much more difficult in compounds. And so you have to have more energy, and hydrochloric acid is a high level of energy to break down those really dense molecules of the proteins. Carbs start getting broken down in the mouth by amylase, right? And so it starts getting broken down pretty easily. Put something, light with carbs, it starts to just dissolve. Put some rice in your mouth, let it sit for a little while. If it's properly cooked, it will start to dissolve. And essentially when we're eating, we should really pulverize the food. The mouth is like the actual blender, right? So I had this conversation with an Ayurvedic doctor many years ago, and I was talking to her about smoothies, and she said smoothies are ridiculous. She's like, the mouth is the natural blender. But from my experience, I understand that smoothies can serve a certain purpose at a certain time of day, certain time of life, certain conditions. I've found smoothies to serve a very vital role in reestablishing a person's digestive capacity so that they can consume better food that are more properly formed again. It's sort of like baby steps. When we were babies, we were doing mother's milk, which is already pre-digested by the mom. And then we were doing baby food, which is like pre-processed in a way, whether it was homemade mashed potatoes or mashed yams and squish in the baby feed because the teeth aren't there and there's not enough strength in the digestive system as the body's forming. So we're looking at hi, Violet and Jeanette. Yes, I would gladly consider doing a cooking class, and I'm actually thinking about it possibly for October or early November, something like that. So that's great. So eating really plays an important function for the body, and so we have to pay close attention. And so if we're feeling hot some days, then we eat things that are cooling. If we're feeling cool some days, we eat things that are more heating. If we feel kind of heavy some days, then we should eat things that are on the lighter side of things. And if we're feeling very light and ungrounded, then we should eat something that's moderately weighted down. We have to use these qualities, or gunas in Ayurveda, to understand what is the presenting situation, what is essential, and what's the opposite. Because it's, there's an axiom in Ayurveda that says like increases like and opposites decrease. So we understand ourselves more intimately when we're paying attention to what our bodies are telling us, and then we look at what we're introducing to our bodies through our senses, and then we start going in that direction. Now the mind's going to be very unruly, because that's what happens when we have the attention of an unruly mind. And so there are certain practices like meditation and yogic practices and other spiritual practices and other sort of practices that allow our minds to focus on specific things on a regular basis, on simplicity versus letting it run awry and just taking over, and then over a sudden the mind's going everywhere and the body's kind of following along. It's sort of like the parent taking that child that is sort of ADD and just kind of like flailing about and just kind of like, nah, and so we want to kind of bring it down, bring it to a more centered place. And then when we're in a centered place, we can trust the intuitive wisdom of the body, because it knows. It's not even just a level of intuitiveness in that woo-woo sense. There's a science to understanding that when there's an increased level of intelligence, that the body will respond, and we have the faculties on a deeper level of consciousness to make better choices. So we have to find our ways to cultivate this practice within the mind. So we have to connect the body and the mind, so that things can be more fluid and you can be more aligned, and you don't have to be so restricted in life to dietary things that are just called diets. When you're eating properly per your constitution, you're eating properly per your current state, whatever you might be experiencing, hyperacidity, insomnia, cracking joints, indigestion, gastritis, like all these things are presentations. And they took some time to get there. So it's not that we woke up and one day there was a condition suddenly. Health is very dynamic in Ayurveda. It's not very static. If we're walking down the street and we see a big hole, if we're paying attention, we can walk and go, wow, there's a big hole right there. So I can choose to walk around it or not pay attention and fall into it, and then all of a sudden but we're still making choices along the way up until the hole appears and until it's right at our feet. And so we get to decide, what do we want to do? So when we're having health issues, they're usually cumulative based on previous practices, which is history. And history does catch up to us. So we think whatever we eat today isn't going to really affect us tomorrow. That's a lie. And the body will tell you the truth, because it is a historical system. And it records everything. It records what you're doing. And really, when you're processing food, just because you ate it today and you pooped tomorrow and peed tomorrow morning, doesn't mean everything that you ate yesterday is all said and done. It's still going an undercurrent of processing that you're not aware of. You just saw the immediate things that the body was like, okay, we took out the bulk of whatever we don't need here, and we're going to keep the rest, and the rest you won't know about. But you will know about this, because we talked about the Juvenile Hud Elections, which are the outcomes of proper healthy digestion, inspiration and the sense of healthy wanting to eat and drink and things like that. And so we are going to be a byproduct of the past, because the body's going to remind us, oh yeah, I remember in the springtime when you were indulging in all those cheesecakes or all those ice creams, and now you're feeling congested or mucousy or low energy or low immunity several months later. And you're like, but I've been eating healthy the past couple of weeks. The body doesn't care. The body's like, remember what you did last summer? And actually it was a title of a workshop I was going to teach on cooking prior to COVID happening. I was going to title it, and maybe I will title the next cooking class again, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Because the body records all this information. And so, in knowing that amazing wisdom that the body possesses, it's not that complicated, but it is, because we weren't taught in so many ways how to properly eat. So we get to make the choices of what our health's going to look like by taking charge today, by making certain choices and being diligent about this. You have to be diligent. So if you're not used to eating healthy and you're not used to really making better choices, you get to start today. Because as long as you wake up with a new breath, beginning the day, you can make a new choice and you can change what life looks like for you based on your perspective, and continue moving forward with that intention. And with a little bit of effort here and there, or a lot of effort depending on what you're dealing with, the body will come around, more or less. Depends how far along you are also within your health or ill health, that some things take time. So when patients come to see me and they're saying, oh, well, how long is this going to take before I feel better? Well, how much time do you have to invest today and tomorrow and the day after and the week after and the month after to start undoing the things that were done based on previous choices? It's like investing in a bank. I can put a penny a day, I can put $1 a day, put $10 a day, and then at the end of the month when I see the statement, I can see how much interest I've earned on top of whatever I invested in. But it's the same way. What you invested in today will be worthwhile. The more you invest, the more you will get on your return. And especially during these trying times of pandemic, issues where people are still struggling with severe anxiety and depression. I see and hear from new clients coming in that they don't want this anymore. They don't want the anxiety or the depression, or they don't want the having the excess weight. You know, my clients and I that have been working with me through COVID, none of them have gained weight. None of them have gained the COVID weight. I haven't gained the COVID weight. I've maintained because of proper, healthy diet and lifestyle. And this is important to note. And this is how Ayurveda produces amazing outcomes based on what we're doing today. So I would love to work with all of you, and anyone that is interested and willing, just know you have to be committed to this process. As you commit, I commit. And then there will be some time that happens between the moment of saying yes and the work that you put into it, that you'll start noticing results, and you're going to feel amazing. So digestive issues, sleep issues, weight issues, joint issues, mind issues, anxiety, PTSD stuff coming up for people, amazing. I would love to work with all of you because Ayurveda is capable, and I love being of service to the community. So feel free to private message me. I do have a COVID special going on with discount on the package, so that you can be supported, you know, in some ways financially, so that you can make your investment in your own optimal health, so that long run you're not paying in co-payments and hospital visits and doctor visits and all these other things with Western meds, and only using them as needed. So feel free to contact me, and until next week, have an amazing day, and I look forward to hearing from all you. Thank you guys for listening.